Hi and welcome or welcome back. It's been 6 months since I started to learn Korean, and today I'm here to give you a little update, share some stats, and show how little progress I have made. Just in case you don't know me, I'm Emmy. I'm a native German speaker, obviously speak English as well, and I would consider myself fluent in Japanese, which somewhat helps when learning Korean because the structures of the languages are somewhat similar and the vocab, there's some overlap there. I'm also highly literate in Dutch, but can't speak a single word because I don't care enough, and I'm somewhere in the beginner to intermediate stage for Spanish. I'm a huge fan of graded readers. I love reading. Reading is so underrated, honestly. I also say yes to grammar study, yes to initial vocab grinding, yes to pop-up dictionaries, yes to graded readers, and yes to anything that makes me overcome that initial hurdle of being a complete noob. Well then, let me summarize my Korean journey so far so that you kind of know where I'm currently at and how these stats that I will share with you later kind of come to be. So I started in February of this year, and I got the Korean Refold 1K deck to get me started on some vocab. I brushed up on my Hangul so that I would know what I'm actually reading. And then I went through this grammar book that I just had lying around at home. I got to around 400 cards in the Anki deck, and then in month 2 I just kind of dropped it because I wasn't really feeling Anki anymore and thought that I could just learn more words by watching things and reading things. So then in the second and third month, I would just kind of watch things here and there, and I didn't understand anything, obviously. And I would try to read on Link, but it was so painful. I was so slow, and there's so many verb conjugations that obviously I didn't learn from the very super beginner textbook. And so I was really confused about all the conjugations. I didn't really understand how the verbs interacted, and I didn't really learn much during that time because I was just watching things and then trying to read things, but I kind of gave up on that pretty quickly and I didn't do anything else. Then at the end of April, I noticed that I wasn't really getting anywhere. I wasn't making any progress. Things weren't getting easier. I didn't feel like I was learning anything. And I did some introspection. I analyzed what problems I was facing and kind of tweaked my study routine a little bit. There's a whole video about how I readjusted my study routine to better fit the problems that I was facing as a beginner, and that I think a lot of beginners are actually facing. Namely, not having any words that they know and kind of struggling with the grammar. A few weeks after I filmed that video and had kind of started getting into the routine of studying Korean with my new study routine, I got really busy with my university final thesis that I had to write, and for about the second half of May and all of June, I didn't even think about studying any Korean. I literally had no time. There was no capacities for me to do anything of that. I was kind of getting back into it, but very shortly after that, I got hit by COVID and I was down for about a week and a half or 2 weeks. I'm obviously a little sad that I had to take such a long break, first for my thesis, and then COVID on top of that was really unfortunate. I mean, it was basically a 2-month break that I took. But I'm back to studying now. It's going pretty well, I would say. I managed to kind of catch up to where I was before I took that really long break. So I guess my whole progress is just delayed by a few months now. But honestly, I'm not in a rush. I already said that when I was starting, I said that this is a long-term thing for me. I'm not rushing to be fluent in a year, none of that. So it's no problem. Okay, so now that you kind of know how things went down, what all happened in the last 6 to 7 months, I'm gonna give you some stats, and then we're gonna go do some link reading, and then I'm gonna give you some thoughts just on Korean and difficulties and all that. So between February 1st and August 1st, I studied 60 out of the 180 days that there were. Obviously, even during the times that I was studying, I wouldn't study every single day. I would have a few break days in between, and even now that I'm pretty consistent, I still don't study every single day. So this is what my Anki graph looks like for basically since I started up until now. As you can see, there's this really long break in between, which obviously didn't help. And this is what my cards currently look like. Remember, I reset them at the beginning of July, and a lot of the cards, as you can see, are suspended because I still kind of remember them from earlier this year. So it's not like I forget everything, which is really good. And the first, I don't know, 200 or so cards, I still kind of remembered them. So either I would click on easy or I would just suspend them if I was pretty sure that I would remember them. As for new cards, I do between 10 to 15 cards a day, depending on how capable I feel that day. Sometimes I'll do a little less, sometimes I'll just do 7, but generally between like 10 and 15. Some days I don't do any new cards, however. Some days I'll just do my reviews and be done. And right now I'm at a total of about 620 cards. My retention rate is absolutely horrible, I will admit that, but as I said in many of my previous videos, I don't use Anki to learn the words. I familiarize myself with the word, and then I will go out, either watch something or read something, and that is where I really learn the words. That's why I'm not too worried about like forgetting words or whatever. Speaking of reading, I do my Korean reading in Ling as I do with most of my other languages, but I might move to Migaku once I know a few thousand more words. When I took my notes for this video, I was at about 1,100 known words. I might be at about 100 more. As you can see, when I started out, I read less than 1,000 words every single month because the things that I was reading are just really short. And obviously my reading was horrible, and it still is, but it just takes so long to go through even the most simple texts. But then when we look at this graph, the last 30 days of my reading journey, we can see that actually I'm reading between 200 to 400 words a day, which is about 1 to 2 book pages depending on the book, obviously. Now, 1 to 2 pages is still not the most, and it still takes me about 20 minutes to even go through that, but it's helping so much. For grammar studies, I use the Talk to Me in Korean website. I just use their free grammar guide. Basically, there's a whole bunch of grammar points, and I'm halfway or a bit more than halfway through level 3 and just working on that, not every day, but at least once or twice a week. And then finally, I have spent about 15 to maybe now it's 20 hours listening to Korean videos. About 5 of those hours were before my big break, and then the last 15 hours or so were after my break, so in the last about 4 weeks, I would say. That comes out to an average of 20 to 30 minutes of listening practice every single day, which I don't do it every day. I more have like big chunks of just watching stuff, then have a break, and then I have another big chunk of just watching a few things. But an average of like 20 to 30 minutes is exactly what I'm aiming for. Okay, next is just some of my thoughts kinda that I wrote down throughout the month or while I was scripting for this video. They're not really in any particular order, just what came to mind. Obviously, having had this really long time in between where I didn't do any studying, I was just too busy, and it kind of set me back a lot, but I don't feel like I should try to catch up on that time because it would just put unnecessary pressure on me. I wish that I could read more, in the sense that I wish I could have longer reading sessions. Right now I do like 20 to 30 minutes of reading, and after that I'm just so done. I'm so tired, and it's really hard for me to focus on any more reading. I know it's probably still gonna take a while until I can finally like read longer sessions without being so tired, but I'm really looking forward to that. My motivation to study Korean is still really high. I'm not tired of learning the language. I'm still looking forward to getting better and studying continuously to make progress. However, I wish, and this goes back to the reading thing, I wish there were more graded readers, in the sense that the gradient was a bit slower. What I mean is that currently I'm going through the graded readers, right? And I'm starting with the very easy ones. the ones that are like 4 lines. And then I'm done with that, and the next one is a page. And that jump is okay, but now I'm done with the 1-page ones. And now the next jump is 3 pages, and it just feels like I didn't have enough time to adapt to the 1-page ones. Like I'd need some that are a page and a half and then 2 pages. It just feels like that jump is pretty big. I know it doesn't sound like a lot. It's honestly not a problem as much as it is just being more comfortable and like just having more time to adapt, not having to push myself so hard. But there are so many Korean graded readers, I shouldn't even be complaining, to be honest. And the last thing is kind of the resemblance of Korean and Japanese sentences. They are pretty similar in some aspects, and knowing Japanese has definitely helped me to get into the thinking of Korean sentences. I know I mentioned in my other video that there were also vocab similarities, but I don't feel like the vocabulary is what is helping too much, unless maybe if you study the sound changes that could help, but I didn't. So far it's really more been like the way of thinking in Korean or in Japanese has helped me understand Korean thinking a little better than maybe if I didn't have that background knowledge. Obviously, I'm still at the beginning and there's still a lot more to discover, but oh yeah, the other thing is verbs. Korean has so many verb endings, so many conjugations. Japanese is so much easier. You have like 6 verb endings. They're super regular if you use the correct system to understand how it works. And Korean just has like too many. It's so many. I know I'll get behind it eventually. One day I'll get the structure of like all the different verb conjugations, but right now it's still a little bit of a struggle. So the only thing that's helping with Japanese is really the way of thinking, the way of structuring thoughts and sentences. Okay, we almost made it. This is the content part. I'm gonna share which things I've been reading and which dramas I've been watching. When I first started reading earlier this year, I used the Talk to Me in Korean real life conversations in Korean for beginners, I think is what they're called, because they're available on Link for free. I then moved on to the Storybooks Canada Korean Stories Level 1. They're basically just really short stories. Like every story is like maybe 7 sentences, and they're really short sentences. They have really cute pictures. They're available for free, and they're just exactly the right level that I needed. I then read the Talk to Me in Korean easy readings for beginners or something. They're like little paragraphs on one specific topic, and it's like 5 sentences or something, which was really good because they were really short. I then moved back to the Storybooks Canada Korean Stories Level 2 and 3, which were just a bit harder than the thing that I read before and the Level 1 stories. The thing about the Storybook Canada stories is that they're a little weird in the sense that they're unusual. They're not like the typical blah 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 goes to school, blah 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 goes to work, or like fairy tales. No, they're kind of out there. They're just a little strange, so sometimes it's hard to know whether you understood something or you didn't because of the weird story or because you didn't understand the vocab. In a way that makes them more interesting than a lot of other things out there though, because they kind of get your brain going a little bit. And right now I'm reading a graded reader called Learning Korean Through Fairy Tales, which they start out pretty easily, like nicely at a level that I could read, and then they get progressively more difficult and more long. I also read a few stories in Korean short stories for beginners, but as I said, those are like pretty long. At least for me, they feel pretty long, and I can't quite get through them because there's a lot going on in there. So I might go back to those once I am done with what I'm currently reading. Oh, and for some of these books, there is an English translation, there is grammar exercises, there is vocab lists. I basically only take the Korean part, the Korean story, and import it to Link. I don't do any of the other exercises or anything. I just do the pure reading. I don't know what exactly I'm gonna read next. I'll probably just keep importing things to Link, and then Link will show me how hard each of these things is, so that I know which thing I can read next without going through too much trouble. I know they have a whole bunch of graded readers on the Talk to Me in Korean website. There's also some other things like the Ollie Richard readers, and I'm sure there's some other companies that have graded readers for Korean as well. The only thing that I don't really like is that there's a lot of like fairy tale ones, and those have a lot of animals and random objects that I don't really care about learning as a beginner, but I guess they are more entertaining than just random sentences, I guess. For listening, I started out earlier this year watching comprehensible input channels, basically just people like drawing stuff and then telling a little story about it. But then I later switched to watching web dramas, I think is what they're called. They're just really short dramas, like 10 to 15 minutes an episode. And I watch that now. It's so easy to stay focused on them because they are so short. And I feel like as a beginner, my attention span is really short and I can't really focus on these really long 40-minute episodes just yet. Also, with a drama that short, obviously the plot is gonna be slightly simplified. They don't have time to like build characters really well and have all these plot lines and plot twists and everything. So it is really nice to watch that and kind of get what's going on. When I first started to watch them, I watched them raw, but then I noticed that I just didn't understand anything, again, because I don't have any words that could make me understand them. And so now there is Korean subtitles, they are hard Korean subtitles in the show. And then on top of that, I put the English subtitles, and then whenever I hear something that I know, I can just look down, check if it's actually what I think it is, and if I want to actually understand the show, I just look at the English subtitles. Because remember, my main immersion is not listening and watching dramas. My main immersion is from reading. Okay, and finally we're going to talk about some future goals for Korean. When I first started, I said that I wanted to consume 5 pieces of written media. To me, that includes graded readers. And I think I can do that. I am gonna be there by the end of the year. I also said that I wanted to maybe film a video in Korean. I don't think that is happening anymore at this point. There's just not enough time for me to learn enough words and then be able to do sentences and produce Korean in a manner that would allow me to film a whole video in Korean. I might get to a point where I can script parts of a video, or like maybe a short scene or something, and then either read it off or just try to memorize it, but a whole video in Korean is really, really unlikely at this point. I still want to practice forming sentences though. Towards the end of the year, I'll start to maybe write a little bit, or like, well, it's probably gonna be writing, let's be real, but just so that, I can start using the words that I'm learning in actual sentences. Speaking of words, in my half-year language update video, I said that I wanted to potentially try to get to 5k known words on LingQ. I knew that that could be a really big goal or a really small goal depending on how things went, and I noticed that right now my reading speed is just too slow to encounter enough words to learn. I still have 6 weeks, so I do think that I could go to 3k if I tried, and maybe 3.5 or 4k if I tried really, really, really hard. But right now I think 3k for the end of the 3rd quarter sounds about what I can do. So the plan is to finish the 1k deck, keep going through graded readers, push myself a little more than I currently am, just progressively read more and more, keep going through the Talk to Me Korean grammar summaries, and also keep up my 20 to 30 minute a day average listening practice. Ideally, eventually I'd obviously move away from graded readers and more towards real stories, but I don't think that is happening anytime in the near future. I could see it happen towards the end of the year though. Okay, I think this is enough talking about Korean. If you have any questions about my method or any stats or resources, feel free to leave a comment. And then I guess for Korean updates, I'll be back in about half a year for Korean content, maybe in a few weeks. I don't know. I'll see. Bye bye.